How to find an awesome guy and let him ask you out. This will change your lives forever. And the people that you know will change their lives too. Okay? I wanted to talk about this because I want to be able to address some of the issues that you guys face in your life. And if you're a guy, you need to listen to this too, because if you're a guy, you need to listen to this too, because you probably have friends that are girls, hopefully, right? They ask you stuff like this, like, what should I be looking for in a guy, and like, how do I know he's right for me, and like, what should I do, dot, dot, dot. Some of you guys have friends that are girls, right? They're a sister or something. Okay. Yeah, I know you have a sister. All right, so the purpose of today is for you guys to start thinking about what are some of the qualities that we should be looking for for brothers in our church. All right, what are some of the things also for guys? Like, what are some things we should be aspiring to? Okay, as the format of all my classes, I'd like you guys to be able to discuss. So you guys might need to move your chairs closer together when we break up in a second. But my first question for you guys is, what qualities do you want to affirm in guys? Okay? And when I ask this, I also mean this way. As a church culture, what are some things that we want to affirm and encourage men to be? All right, think about that. Like, let's say in a dream world, okay? If like God just awakened the church, a revival broke out, right? And people were just filled with like God's spirit, like love Jesus and like want to be more godly people. What would that look like? What would the guys in this church be like? You know, if like just revival and awakening broke out in this church. Okay? So get in groups of like 4 people and talk about this. So what are some qualities you want to affirm in guys? Specifically like for our age group, right? So like 20s and stuff. Okay? Qualities you want to affirm. All right.
You mean like defend it?
Okay.
Or like just keep it close to you?
No. I want to hear some of your guys' ideas, some of the things you guys threw out. Okay, so this group over here, James group. What do you guys throw out?
Okay, well, leadership.
Leadership. Meaning what?
Meaning, you can lead a relationship. Like
Meaning?
Or,
Someone like you can submit to.
submissive.
Okay. Let me want to phrase this. Okay. Let's say leadership in terms of moral, physical, and emotional. Okay. You know, that word leadership is a tricky word because there's a lot of ways you can think about leadership. And some of those ways are bad. Like, you know, I actually heard a stat. If you're into business, all right, and you like wanted to own your own business, something like that, if you get an MBA, statistically, you're like 500% more likely to commit crime than if you did not get an MBA. Just statistically speaking, like those who receive MBAs and how much white collar crime they commit versus those who don't, right? And so I think like, what kind of leadership they're teaching? You know, like, all right. So I think in the area of leadership, we're talking about guys, right? I want you guys to kind of evaluate, you know, people on these kind of categories. You know, can a guy lead you morally, or just right, also spiritually? But morally is the easy way to think about it sometimes, right? In terms of like the guy's integrity, and so a good way to tell a guy, you could throw that word integrity around, but it's hard to find a guy's integrity. Ask his community. Okay, so if you think about like, hey, I'm interested in this guy, I don't know if he's good or not. Find out the people he hangs out with, right? And also the people he's around. So if his close friends aren't like, you know, don't respect him, then he's already in trouble. All right. But some people, they're not necessarily close friends, but also ask the people he's around. They interact with. So for example, his coworkers. Right. Say he works in a workplace, but he's not really good friends with his coworkers, but he knows them. His coworkers are a good way to find out his integrity. One of the scariest things for me when I was applying to, before I was with OMF, I applied for YWAM, it's another mission agency. But on their application was you give your application to your boss, right? And like your boss has to answer like how much of a Christian witness is he at work and stuff like that, you know. And like my boss is not a Christian, you know. And I was like, dude, that is so scary, you know. Because it's one thing to be like a Christian at like church. It's easy to like make people like you. But at work, like your secular boss, and they ask them questions about your spirituality, you know.
Pretty intense.
It is intense, right? But at the same time, like, you should know, right? Like, and we should all should be humble enough to like face the reality of like how we actually are. Okay. So you want to know about a guy's reputation. His reputation does mean a lot, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of moral, spiritual. Physical. Okay, you don't have to be the biggest guy in the world to protect your girlfriend or your wife. Okay, that's just the reality. Okay. Especially if you look at like Ultimate Fighting, like some of the biggest guys are the best fighters. What physical protection does mean, though, is the courage to stand up. Okay, to stand up not just for your family, but also for others. Okay, listen how I said that. The courage to stand up not just for your family, but also for others. Would you be okay if your husband, right, protected you like down a dark alley, but then saw someone else get beat up? It's like, oh, I don't want to get involved in that. That's too scary for me. Would you be okay with that? Right? Like you saw like a 60-year-old lady get mugged, and your husband's like, oh dang, like look at it big. Right? Like so you're safe, right? 'Cause you're not involved in it, right? But would you be happy with that if your husband was like that? So, that's something to think about. Right? That's something to think about. Emotional toughness is huge. Okay, emotional toughness is huge. And what I mean by that is the ability and the willingness to communicate with you about emotions. This is actually something that's a really big issue, especially for the military. If you guys ever read like news stories, those who have gone to war and have come back have a lot of emotional issues for a lot of reasons, right? But a lot of guys are physically strong but emotionally weak, meaning that they aren't able to have kind of process out their emotions. Like when they're hurt, they never say like, "Hey, I'm hurting inside." Right, like if they have like family drama, they aren't willing to admit they have family drama, you know. Or if they're like, or the opposite is true. It's like, you know, if you love your children, you love your wife, you love your family, having the vulnerability to say that, you know, that's really, really important. And actually, to be surprised, a lot of guys who are physically strong are really emotionally weak. And just so you know, I mean, even in the military, we want to deal with that kind of culture. In the military now, you have that counseling. Okay, it's because we realize like, you can't just train someone physically. Right, you totally neglect their emotional level. So, looking for a guy in emotional leadership. Is the guy vulnerable? Okay, is the guy vulnerable? Meaning, is the guy actually express what's inside of him? You see this a lot of times in the Bible. You look at some of the people that God commands in the Bible, right? They're actually open with God. You know, they don't try to hide their feelings from God, but they actually express it. Read some of the Psalms, right? They're not all from David, they're from other psalmists too. Read some of those Psalms. Those are the kind of things that God affirms in people, right? And so to have someone who's emotionally open, be able to say like, you know, this is how I feel today. This is how I feel towards God. This is how I feel towards people, right? It's really important. Okay, next.
We thought someone who pursues God first.
I like trying this. Christ-centered.
There we go.
Or pursuing God works too, but it's easier to think about it this way. What does that mean? What does that mean to you guys? What does that look like?
It's like prioritizing as far as how you act, how you think.
Okay. How you think? Someone else like what else does that mean?
I think also like, you know, what you value, you know, over other things.
Exactly. What does the guy do in most of his free time? Okay, I think that's a really important thing. Guys love hobbies, right? Guys love cars, love computers, love guns, love sports. All right, and you know what? And the thing is, like, okay, you can't always judge a guy by his hobbies, right? 'Cause I know a lot of pastors who are like into things that you wouldn't think they'd be into. One of our directors at OMAC is like into sci-fi, right? He's like, oh guys, let's talk about teleportation today. This is a missions conference. It's like, no, stay with me. It's like Skype, you know, like how do you like how's church pastor? I'm like, okay, man, you're too into sci-fi. All right, I'm not just talking about that. I'm not going to talk about guys' hobbies, but honestly, like when he's with other people, you know, maybe new people, what is kind of like naturally kind of start talking about, or like where's some of the things he naturally starts drifting towards? So ministries in the church, right? Does he drift towards ministries in the church? Or does he drift towards more like, I want to do my own thing and like watch TV and be lazy? Okay. Also, right, I put this on later on my Facebook, Twitter. Some of you guys have seen it. You know, I think one of the criteria for girls, like how you judge their hearts, is like how does a girl react when they see a sale at the mall? Okay? And at the same time, how do they react when they see like an offering plate at church? We don't have offering plates now. Well, sometimes we do, like offering bags. How does that girl react the same way? Right? So how does a girl react when it's about buying stuff for her? And how does a girl react when it's about giving towards others? Obviously for a guy, right? How does a guy react, right, when he has like a lot of money left over? Right? Say like he had a bonus at work or something like that. What does he do with that money? I'm really serious about this. Like, it really tells a guy's heart. Because a lot of times, like, when he also gets a lot of money real quick, it's like, okay, what are you thinking about? Right? Because guys always think, like, if I had extra $5,000, I would, like, you know, do ... Right? And so, that's something you have to look at. Right? What is he thinking about? What is he valuing all the time? Right? I mean, if a guy just, like, constantly, as a pattern in his life, just continues to pursue, like, taking random trips, buying expensive foods, you know, buying expensive things, kind of tells you where his heart at, right? There's other guys who, when they receive money, they think about how can I bless others with it, right? How can I make the life of my community better with it, right? I want to give you guys some examples of this in my own life. Some of the people I respect in my own life. You know, like so being 25, I'm old enough to see some guys like I kind of grew up with and see how their lives turned out. Some of the people I really respect, I don't. Some of you guys know who he is. Jason Ma. Some of you guys know who he is. Right? He's my age. Yeah. I met him. I met him a couple times. But like one of the things I respect about his life is the fact that he could be doing a lot of other things. Right? Honestly, I think if he was in business, like he could probably open his own business, be successful, do all that stuff. Right? But the fact is, he chooses to focus on the life of the church, and he chooses to focus on building up communities and helping them to see God in a more clear way and to reach out. Right? I mean, that to me is really impressive. I'm not saying you have to be in ministry to be impressive, but it impresses me when I see guys who could be doing other things with their life. Right? Could be making a lot of money, could be making a lot of fame for themselves, and then give that up and decide to serve God instead. Right? That to me shows me where his priorities are and where he values. All right? The guys who don't impress me are the guys who are like, oh man, I'm going to go to the MBA and work for Goldman Sachs. So, Goldman Sachs, I think starting salary like $100,000. Right? And so, seriously, there are guys like I grew up with, like, their goal in life was just to make 6 figures. And then, like, forget everybody else, like, forget this world, forget my family, forget my friends, forget, like, anything else in the world. I just need to make 6 figures in my life. Right? And he shows, and their life, like, they have a lot of things. I mean, they have a nice house, they have a nice car. They don't have that many friends, but at least they have a lot of material possessions. Okay, so priorities, values, what to think about. Okay, give me one more from this side. What's some things you want to affirm in guys?
Talked a little bit about not only leadership, but servanthood, servanthood on contrast, and also decency in the sense of not so flirtatious.
Okay, I'll talk about that.
There are a couple of things we talked about. Just initiative is also something that was kind of mentioned, and also things that we talked about last week, like living simply, diligence and communication. A lot of these things that we've talked about.
Just let me answer this. We said leadership and we said servanthood. How does that work together?
Servant leadership.
So what does that look like? How can you be in charge but yet be a servant? I don't see a lot of CEOs like do janitorial work.
Some of the things we talked about was just individual qualities and how we're all better in some ways and not so much in other ways. And so in some ways we can lead, and in some ways we're better serving.
I think humility has a huge part.
Yeah, I was gonna say
That's good. As well. Knowing what you're not good at and admitting that and just doing what you can.
It's interesting, right? I mean, I think like we think about some of our ideals like masculinity, and then we judge Jesus against his ideals that Jesus doesn't measure up. Right? We think of like masculine like G.I. Joe, right? Kind of like, yeah, let's do this, right? Or like the opposite is like the really artsy guy who's just like always like into like weird stuff, right? And they're like, well, Jesus wasn't like that. And so, again, I think when we think about servanthood, it's just a desire to put others before themselves. I think is huge. Okay, a desire to put others before themselves. I think that affects both leadership and the servanthood. A leader who is there, right, to build himself up is not a leader worth following. Okay, I actually had leaders like this in my life. When I was in the Marines, I remember I remember one of my sergeants. All right, he told us, we like some information, right? He's like lecturing us. You know, guys, I have never failed in anything in my life, and I will not fail in that. Right? And I'm like, wow, is that a real statement? Right? Like, I don't even know what to say at this point. He's like, I've never failed in anything, and you will not cause me to fail. Right? And I'm like, so we're going here to like build up your resume. Right? You don't even care about us. You just want to succeed. And like, so we did a competition in New Orleans. You know, we took like 5th, I think. Right? So not even like top 3, like no trophy, nothing. Right? So I was waiting to see what he's gonna say. And then like he's like stood in front of us like, you know what? We succeeded today because I did the best with what I had. Right? I was like, wow! Way to bring us down! Right? And then reaffirm yourself at the same time. Alright. That to me was someone who was not putting others before themselves. Right? Seriously, think about that, right? Like, you don't want to follow people like that. Okay? And you will never call people like that servants. Like, they might do stuff that helps you, but it's not through a servant's attitude. Okay? And the last one, purity. This is seriously really, really important. Find out about the guy's sexual purity. Okay? And the way you find out about that is, first of all, does he have accountability? Alright? If a guy does not have accountability, you really, really should worry. Okay, this is a challenge to guys, and you guys need to get accountability. Okay? What that means is that he should be in like a small group of some kind. He should be regularly meeting up with other brothers. Right? It concerns me when Christian guys are afraid to have close Christian friends. Right? Or don't have close Christian friends. Right? Because the area of sexual purity is huge. Okay? And a lot of people, right, this is where the dangerous part is. You know, for Christian girls, it's not hard for you to say no to a Christian guy. Or at least if you're a mature Christian girl. It's hard for you to say no to a guy who's nominally Christian. Meaning he's Christian by name only. Okay? Because there's a lot of guys out there who say they're Christians, but they don't go to church. Or they don't have accountability of any kind. Right? And those are the kind of guys that a lot of Christian girls get mixed up with. Alright? Because it's honestly, mature Christian girls won't kind of knows by nature not to go to Christian guys. Or non-Christian guys. Right? But it's really, really hard to say, is this guy legitimate? Is this guy like Jesus? Is this guy actually following Christ right now? Right? And that's basically the test of purity. You know, a lot of guys have made a commitment to Christ once in their past. That doesn't mean anything. Right? Jesus himself says that doesn't mean anything. It's, are you walking with Jesus every single day? And are you doing things in your life to make sure that you are keeping your walk with Jesus? And that's what I'm talking about purity. And that's huge. Okay? I do not want to downplay that. That's huge. Some other just practical stuff. Does the guy have friends that are girls? How many or how few? Okay, because both are in trouble. If the guy has no friends that are girls, right, it tells you that he's a jerk. Right? He doesn't know how to interact with girls. Right? Also, I'm not sure this is statistically true, but in my mind, anecdotally, right, those guys who don't have healthy relationships with girls tend to be more susceptible to pornography. The reason for that being, right, is pornography is basically objectifying women. If you don't know a lot of women and aren't really friends with them, it's easy to objectify women. Okay? The opposite. If a guy has too many friends that are girls, right, this should be a red flag to you. Alright, it should be a red flag to you. It means a couple things. It could just mean like, you know, they feel like they need to confide in women all the time. Right? If you want a husband like that, you can go ahead. You go after that if you want. I have a close friend. She's not a Christian, but I remember going to her birthday party one time, and it was 18 guys and 3 girls. Right? So like me and the 18 guys were like, wow, this is an awkward birthday party for a girl. But I think for her, it's like, no, she can get along with other women too well. no matter who you are, male or female, you want to have healthy relationships with both sexes. Okay, too much of one is bad. All right. Okay. I want you guys to get back in your groups and talk about warning signs. All right, warning signs slash. I actually call these pet peeves, but there's probably like a more spiritual word for this. I don't know what it is. Okay, talk to you guys. Like, what are some things that you don't want to see in a guy that you want to date? Also, what are some of the guys you don't want to encourage your friends to kind of gravitate towards? Okay, because you probably all have friends that go for the wrong kind of guys, right? So, what are some things that you want to tell your friends not to go for? All right, break group.
It won't even
Start
go
bringing it back.
like, just a little bit.
All right, let me hear some warning signs, pet peeves.
Okay, well, I really like what Chris just said. Someone who can't take constructive criticism.
What? I'm gonna say hottie.
Not good.
Or I'm gonna say.
That's me.
I know.
Why is this a problem?
Because it shows that he's not open to seeing his faults and changing them if he needs to, and that thinking that he's always right.
There's one thing in the Bible says that God opposes. All right, a person who's proud. And I think Augustine said this, like that pride is the root of all sin. Meaning that you start placing yourself in the place of God, right? Like you start declaring like that's right, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong. It's a dangerous place to be. All right, it's a dangerous place to be when you're created and you're saying to the Creator, like I disagree with you. Right, I think you're wrong. So yeah, being open for correction. And again, like, a guy has to have accountability. Okay, a guy has to be willing to have accountability. Not having accountability, I'm not just talking about just spiritual life, but just everything in life. All right, there's no accountability. It's so much shadiness happens. All right, so yes, that's very important. Somewhere in here.
We thought, like, if they're like a convicted felon.
Yes. I hate felons. What's up with that?
Who says convicted felons can't
Yeah,
fight?
Okay, yes, that's a warning sign. It's a felon. You should ask, why are you a
Okay, well, our other one was like just relative like jerkiness.
Look at abrasiveness.
That's good.
Why is that?
Can I clarify what? I about like how the way he treats other people, like also not just like face to face, but like when he's talking about someone behind their back, like what does he say about them?
That's true.
And like, how does he value relationships? Does he have like deep relationships, or is he like all of his friends are like shallow, friends,
Yeah, that's true. I want to talk about it in Christian circles, and the case of the working is really hard. I'm really, really scared of people who are judgmental, right? And people who are, especially, this happens when you're young, right? Especially when they're like my age, okay? Where they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person did ... Such a jerk. I'm gonna like tell everyone he's a jerk. I remember this one story, right? And I don't want to discredit the entire guy's ministry, okay? But I just want to say this one story, it upsets me so much. So some of you guys know Mark Driscoll. Okay, Mark Driscoll is a pastor up in Seattle. He's like a conservative Christian, but he has like he's also kind of like rough on the edges. Like he used to cuss a lot and stuff like that, right? And so John MacArthur, because they're the same kind of theology, so John MacArthur's like, well, I don't think a Christian leader, especially on the national scale, should cuss. And so John MacArthur wrote an article about him, I think in Christianity Today or something like that, right? And Mark Driscoll obviously read the article, right? He's like, what the heck? And basically, like, I think he called up John MacArthur. He's like, you know what? I would appreciate it if you actually just talked to me first before blasting me in national media, right? And like, so when I heard that story, I'm like, that happens all the time in our churches, right? Especially conservative circles like ours, right? It's like we disagree with somebody, and instead of talking to them directly, right? And it's funny because they're white, right? Because I know Asians do this kind of stuff all the time. So when I have white people, I'm like, what? But instead of like talking to them directly, like indirectly through national media, and be like, look how screwed up this guy is, right? I think overall abrasiveness, like willingness to cause division, all right, willingness to kind of discredit others, is a huge, huge flaw, right, in people, especially when they're young, right? For some reason, as you get older, right, you learn more in life, you're more experienced, and you realize that not everyone is so bad, right? It's just when you're young, you don't understand things. You'd love to like, oh my gosh, that person's evil, right? Let everyone judge him. The thing about abrasiveness is that you don't affirm what God is doing in their life, right? And that's something that I'm learning too. Can you disagree with somebody, right, but yet affirm that God is still working through them, right? I think that's a sign of maturity. Can you disagree with somebody, even on a huge level, right? But if that person, especially if they profess to be Christian, can you still say, hey, you know what, God is still working through this person? One of the challenges for me, right, is like, I was reading a story the other day. Piers Morgan, like a celebrity journalist, he interviewed Joel Osteen. Okay, and I hate Joel Osteen. Okay, like his ministry, I think, is really destructive for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that Piers Morgan asked him is homosexuality a sin? All right, and Joel Osteen said yes. And as much as I don't like Joel Osteen's ministry, man, I affirm that was God working in that conversation. The fact that Joel Osteen has the biggest church in America, all right, and he's like, and honestly, probably the best known preacher right now, right? You talk about secular and Christian circles combined. He probably is the best known preacher, and the fact that he said homosexuality is a sin, right? And I was like, man, amen. God is doing it. That's God doing a huge thing in America, right? I mean, because Prop 8 and all these people fighting about homosexuality and all that stuff. But here you have a really mainstream preacher guy who's sometimes he's like, dude, this guy have any biblical convictions, but he's saying homosexuality is a sin, and I think that does more for Christianity than Billy Graham saying it's a sin, And so for me, the challenge for me was you know what, I have to affirm that. I have to be like, you know what, Joel Osteen, I disagree with you on a lot of things. You make me really upset a lot of times, but at the same time, hey, God is working through you. Okay. So, again, really be aware of guys who are just like, oh my gosh, I'm willing to cause division. At this one sign of you being messed up, I will destroy you. Right? Alright. Let's go one more. Pet peeves. Yeah.
On a really shallow level, I cannot stand it when guys are way too high maintenance and one article of clothing is probably more than everything I'm wearing combined, the cost of, I don't know.
Are you jealous?
It makes me concerned that, it's a huge concern. I don't know, when I see my friends dating someone like that, I'm like, you're in trouble. I mean, it's not even just once or twice, but it's every single day, it's really high maintenance, and I feel like people who are like that tend to be on the selfish, jerky side in general, and so it's just, I don't know.
So you gotta know, these jeans, valued at $60. I got them for free. And yeah, it was that day when you check in on Facebook to the Gap and you get free jeans. I got 2 pairs of free jeans. One at UTC and downtown La Jolla. I was like, yeah, dude, $20 in jeans. I tried to sell them on eBay, but everyone had the same idea, and it was $3 on eBay for jeans that day. So I was like, dang it. That's weird.
I have to add to that. So it's one thing to be high maintenance, but another thing to be clean. So it's good to have clean, dress nice, and it's a way to respect other people by not being smelly and stuff. I don't know. I don't know. It's there's one thing to be high maintenance, one thing to be clean. So
again, I talked about this last week with the girls. Okay, in terms of fashion, right? In terms of just hygiene and stuff like that, the keys, you can write this down: modesty and decency. Modesty and decency. Okay, so modesty just is the first thing, high maintenance. Okay, I don't know when we decided that it's cool to show off wealth, right? Especially in the U.S., because the U.S. is like built on like the middle class, and like we're all about like downplaying our wealth. But for some reason, like in like Southern California especially, all of a sudden it became cool to like have really ostentatious brands. It's probably because of like hip hop, urban culture, right? Hey, modesty. The reason why it's important, right, and why it's a godly virtue, is because it takes attention off you and on God. It's really, really bad for the life of the church to have people look at the people and not God. Okay? And people who love attention in the sense of like, everyone look how awesome I am, right? Look how awesome my clothes are, and how much money I have, and how successful I am. That's a really dangerous character trait. Okay? It really, really is. I'm not saying, and again, so the second part is decency. I'm not saying you shouldn't have clothes. Okay? And again, I'll always use the example. In the Marine Corps, right, the branch of our military that fights the most, right, that sees the most time in combat. Every job in the Marine Corps is meant for combat. Right? That's why we train every single Marine to handle a rifle. Not shoot the Air Force. In the Air Force, not everyone can shoot. Right? If you like go to a targeting range with Air Force guys, you'll know like half those guys can't shoot anything. Right? They can't shoot like a water gun like a little kid. Right? You're like, it'd be a really lame water fight. Okay? But the Marine Corps, the branch that fights the most, has the highest standards of dress. Right? We actually have inspections where all they do is just inspect your hygiene, like your breath, and like your nails, and like if you shave well, and how your clothes are fitting. The reason why? Decency. Right? You want to always present yourself in a manner that's respectable to others. Right? So when others look at you, they're not like, oh my gosh, this guy just woke up and like decided to show up. Right? Honestly, because that's honestly really rude to some people. Right? This is for you guys to know when you guys apply for jobs. I won't say the name, but I heard this story of, it was actually one of us, okay, someone in Harvest, showed up for a job interview in flip-flops. Okay, the reason why that's rude, okay, I just want to explain why that's rude, okay, is that a manager, okay, a person who's pretty busy, right, a lot of hours a week they're putting in, takes time out of their day to look at your application, right, to actually sit down with you and have an interview with you. And you just show up like you came out of bed to the interview. You know what you're saying? Your time's not valuable. Right? Like, I appreciate you taking time out of your day, but I don't really care. That's really rude. Right? So the idea of decency, right? The idea is like of dressing so that not just for yourself, but to show others respect. Same thing for a wedding. You don't for a wedding you don't show up in like jeans. All right? Some people think it's cool. All right? It's not cool. All right, so you're disrespecting people getting married. Okay. Same thing for like the pulpit at Harvest. I think we do a pretty good job of like, hey, if you're in the pulpit, like you don't wear flip-flops and stuff, right? You have to try and dress nice, especially it's Sunday. I'm not saying you have to do it, right? Because I know some churches don't because they're like the cool churches. Right? But here at Harvest, we do that to show the sense that we respect what's happening on Sunday morning. That those who present the Word of God should come as if they're ready to present the living Word of God. Okay? So again, modesty and decency. High maintenance, right, is basically just like, oh my gosh, everyone look at me. Alright, and I need to be like affirmed. Like at all times. Alright, open your Bibles. Old Testament, 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel 13. I want to give you guys some examples from the Bible, especially the people that God himself affirms. Okay? 1 Samuel 13. There's one name that appears over and over and over again in the New Testament. Right? And Jesus himself affirms him. Right? And that's King David. Alright, from the Old Testament. Like the second king of Israel. And so because if Jesus himself affirms this guy, right, I think we should look at his life and why Jesus affirms him. So 1 Samuel 13, this is a story about Saul. Just so you guys have context of what everything's going on if you didn't grow up in the church. Samuel's a prophet. Okay. The role of prophet is that you can kind of declare like, hey, this is God's word to the kingdom. This is what God is doing. I'm going to install kings. I'm going to take down kings. And basically he's like the mouthpiece of God. Saul is going to be the first king of Israel. He's going to lead the people to victory over their enemies. Okay. So 1 Samuel 13. Now Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel 42 years. Saul chose 3,000 men from Israel. 2,000 were with him at Michmash in the hill country of Bethel. And 1,000 were with Jonathan, his son, at Gibeah and Benjamin. And the rest of the men he sent back to their homes. Jonathan attacked the Philistine outpost at Geba, and the Philistines heard about it. And then Saul had the trumpet blown throughout the land and said, "Let the Hebrews hear." So all Israel heard the news. Saul has attacked the Philistine outpost, and now Israel has become obnoxious to the Philistines. And the people were summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. And so the Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They went up and camped in Michmash, east of Beth Aven. And the Israelites saw that the situation was critical and saw their armies hard pressed. They hid in caves and thickets, among the rocks and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead, and Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings." And Saul offered up the burnt offering. And just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. "What have you done?" asked Samuel. And Saul replied, "When I saw that the men were scattering, and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal. I have not sought the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering." And Samuel said, "You have done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought a man after his own heart, and appointed him ruler over his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." Okay, let's break down what happened in the story. If you guys don't know geography, look at my hands. This is Israel. Okay, this is the Mediterranean Sea right here. This is Israel. Okay, the Philistines are over here. They're by the coast. All right. If you guys kind of understand how culture and stuff works and develops, what happens when you're by the coast? You trade. Right? When you trade and you have a lot of learning and you have a lot of technology. The Philistines, right, because they're by the coast, and they've been there a while. If you remember, Israel just came out of captivity, right? So they haven't had a chance yet to develop their culture. Philistines have been there a while, so they developed iron weaponry, right? And so they have chariots and charioteers and stuff like that. The Philistines are nuts at fighting, right? They're really, really good, right? And they have thousands of organized soldiers and things like that. The Israelites, they've been basically traveling in gypsies for the last couple of years, and so they're not so great at fighting. But then Israel knows that the land is promised to them by God, right? So Saul's son Jonathan attacks the Philippine outpost and be like, "Hey, get out of our land," and I do this for God. Okay, and then all of a sudden the Philistines are like, "Okay, you want to fight? Let's fight." And they assemble thousands. The Bible says as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Probably means as far as you can see is just soldiers. Okay, so Israel's like, "Okay, we're gypsies. We don't know how to fight. We give up." And so Saul is called to lead the people. He's like, "All right, here we go, game time." God tells Saul, wait 7 days. Samuel's going to come and offer burnt offering, and then you're going to fight. You're going to win. What happens during that time? Obviously, you wait that long, people are going to start to wonder what's going on, right? So people start scattering and leaving, right? And then Saul, what does he do? Here's something important you got to know. All right, this is kind of a theological thing. Does the king have authority to offer sacrifices and offerings? Is the king a priest? Yes and no. Okay. I think theologically a king is in the Old Testament, right, especially, well, I guess forever. King, priest, and prophet. Okay? Because Jesus is all three. Right? And the kingly class in the Old Testament foreshadows Jesus. Right? That's what Jesus says he's in the line of David. Why does he do that? Right? He could say he's in the line of anything. I'm in the line of God. But he says, I'm in the line of David. So Jesus is basically claiming an ancestry to not just blood lineage, but also in terms of authority, right? The throne of David. And so Jesus himself is the high priest, right? He's the high priest. He's also a prophet because he speaks scripture, obviously. But he's also king. I would argue this. The king actually does have an ability to do offerings and stuff. That's why David sings in front of the ark of God, he can worship and lead the people in worship. Because he's the priest. So what's the problem here then? The problem is that Saul didn't listen to God. Right? And there's a couple problems. First of all, he's king and people are still scattering. Okay? I want you to notice that. He's king, he has authority in the land, and his people are running away. So basically, he doesn't command respect. Right? His people are like looking at Saul, looking at that thousands, like, okay, we lost. Right? So first of all, you should always think that. Like, Saul is not a man who commands respect. He might be tall and big, probably bigger than the rest of the guys. Being big doesn't mean you command respect. Being big just means you're big. Okay? So first of all, his people are deserting him in front of his face. And so Saul thinks that, you know what, okay, I have to go now. Because I can't get the people to follow me. Right? So I'm just going to attack. How old was Saul when he first became king? Come on, guys, look at the text. Look at the text. Let's look at the first verse.
30?
30. It's not too much older than a lot of us. Not too much older. Man, this is a challenge to young people. All right, this is really the challenge to young people. If you don't command respect, right? What do? Okay, and that's really a challenge of leadership, right? Some leaders will honestly like be pressed and they'll overcome. They'll adapt and overcome. Some leaders will just do foolish things and screw up everything. Okay, so as we talk about this class of like, what do you look for in a guy? That's you have to look at someone and how they react in hard situations. A person's character isn't tested until they're in a hard situation, right? I know some of you guys like to watch those military boot camp movies, like Full Metal Jacket. The first like 20 minutes is what most people watch, right? And like it's like interesting, people get yelled at and stuff, right? The reason we do that in the Marines is because we realize that anyone on paper in an interview is awesome. You know, if I asked you, what do you believe about leadership? You'd be like, it's about serving people, it's about caring, it's about fighting and standing for what's right, right? And then if I yell at you for a few days and I don't give you food, right? And then I say, okay, take this group of people to a mountain down the street. You'd be like, I hate people. People suck. This world is so evil. I used to give up. I've seen that a lot. I've seen a lot of guys who go on an interview and they're like, yeah, I'm all about making sure others are doing well and da-da-da. And the moment they have no food, they're like, can't do this. Life is too hard. Look at a person's character when they're pressed, when they're hard pressed, and see what they do. Okay? Because what does God say about King David, who's going to come later on? What does it say? He's a man after God's own heart. Okay? The first episode of David, you're going to see that he's going to become king, right? Is the battle of Goliath, right? You guys remember the story? Saul's sitting there not doing anything, right? Again, in line with his character. What does David do? Let's do this. If no one, and David basically says, if no one's going to fight, I'll fight. That's why God makes David's line go forever. That's the kind of guy that you want to follow, right? And that's kind of guy who makes a good husband. David was a good husband, right? But at least in his pursuit after God, right? That's something that God commands. And honestly, with as much problems as David has, God still affirms David. He's actually mentioned more in the New Testament, more than any other person. I think he's actually mentioned more than all the Old Testament people combined, like just his name. But the people that God affirms are those who go into a hard situation and says, you know what, let's do what is right. Right? That's the kind of person you want to follow. That's the kind of person you want to look for. All right?